Good evening, everyone. Welcoming each and every one of you joining us on this particular webinar. I'm pretty sure you all have the entire details of what the webinar is going to be panning out into, but I'll just give you a quick gist. But before that, I'll just run you through a few basics and the hygienes of the interface of Zoom that we are running. Any issues with the audio or the video for anyone, please let us know on the chat tab. Again, I'm mentioning this. Please do not put any of your remarks or raise the issues for audio or video on the Q&A segment. Just add it onto the chat box that you have. Everyone using it, the laptop, you all will have the interface buttons on the bottom. Anyone on your on the tablet or your iPad, you will have these particular buttons on the top right-hand corner. Anyone asking questions to the participants, request you all to please put on your questions only in the Q&A segment. Again, I'm repeating, only in the Q&A segment will the questions be taken up for the speakers at the later end. The questions will be answered only at the end of the panel discussions, after the entire discussion is done. So these are the two main factors that that we have. So any issues with the audio and video in the chat section, and any questions for the speakers in the Q&A segment. Now going forward, just to give you all a quick gist on what this particular webinar is about and the genesis of it. This webinar is brought to you by the Commercial Design magazine in collaboration with Wipro Lighting, a company that has been leading the lighting evolution for over 25 years with its keen focus on wellness mainly. We all know, I do realize that the entire topic about COVID, wellness, the safety, the norms have been quite reiterated in the segment, and it's been one of the biggest concerns for people. So hence what we've kind of focused on this webinar, or the discussion that we are focusing on is particularly how organizations are currently addressing it. What's our outlook for the next near future of like 6 months? How we progress from this point on? And there are various other segments that we lead on to with design, with how operations are being managed, with how different stakeholders are coming into picture to understand how the situation will unfold in the entire near future. With this, I would not do much further delay. I would love to introduce my speakers who have joined us. We've brought the speakers together from various different segments. We have operations heads, workspace strategist heads, architects who specialize in workspace design. We also have companies like Cushman, who is working with several companies in this regard. So for this, we have with us Mr. Khurshid Gandhi, who is the managing director at Cushman & Wakefield, who would also be moderating this particular session. Joining him is architect Alad Gore, principal architect Beyond Design Architects. Joining these two gentlemen is Renuka Rajagopal, who is a senior director, real estate and workplace at VMware. We also have Vikas Chawla, director at for India operations for employee and workspace solutions at Adobe. We also have with us Mr. Sumit Anand, who was the global infrastructure leader for Genpact. So with this, I'm going to hand over the platform to Khurshid to take this forward, the entire panel discussion and the webinar session from here on. Khurshid?
Rashmi, we actually have people from different cities too.
Yes, we do. Yes, that's also that we discussed this. So we have two gentlemen from Bombay, we have one from Delhi, and we have two from Bangalore, which is, I think, key cities, key metros that is tackling a lot of dilemmas, and unfortunately with the ironic rise in cases despite all the measures that are stuck in place. So we would love to hear from you all how you guys are managing this off. Please, yes, Khurshid, go ahead.
Thanks, Rashmi. Welcome, everybody. I'll just quickly share a presentation, and a quick run through before we get into our panel discussion. And do let me know as soon as you can see that on your screens. So what we've done is we said what's happening right now, what's happening in the world, right? Where are people at and how quickly are they reopening across the world? And if you look at it, it's typically between a 60 to 80% range, where everybody's got some kind of services open, and we've seen essential services manufacturing across the board have been open, and it's really the services segment that has gotten hammered. Which is for us, that's about 600 million square feet in India alone. So what's happening out there, right? What's happening in our own region with China and Vietnam? What's happening with the US, Australia, and what are the findings that we are seeing as people go back to work? Right. So China, Vietnam, as you would know, have already gone back to work. They, the governments mandated that they get back. Cultural nuances in both locations dictate that people want to see their employees. However, and it's interesting, MNCs out there don't haven't sent it, but they're actually doing a lot of WFH, which is work from home. Also seen, and it's interesting in both locations, onus is on your own individual personal protection rather than you having to do social distancing like we are in a lot of other places. The US, similar to India, has both a lot of state and local guidance, which has come down. In certain places, there is a compulsory mask, which is certain states, like we have in certain states in India as well. But they do not. The CDC, which is has the CDC guidance in the US, has been. It's not a mandated mask usage; it's more indicated mask usage. Australia has gone back to work also, and what we've seen there is people don't wear masks, but they are using protective screens and all kinds of other related things to space people out in their offices. Going forth, we do see a lot of changes in the way people work, and we are seeing a lot of differences in layouts as well as designs for offices. What we think is we've actually accelerated 10 years in 10 weeks, right? Uh, as you all know, and you looked at, if you looked at WFH parameters out of 2018 stated that Europe and the US did only 5.2 and 3.6% of WFH, which today, as you all know, is actually inversed. So work from home is growing, piece in the future. Our rentals are compressing. If you look at Bombay, we've already seen a drop, and that's where my mouse is. We've already seen a drop of 9% in the first quarter alone of this particular crisis, and it will continue to, in our minds, across cities, we will see compression of different shapes and sorts. Cost is going to drive a lot of rethinking on real estate. We've looked at average utilization across the world, and we realize it just ranges between 56 and 61% pre-COVID. And now that everybody's woken up to the fact that they're not optimally using their spaces, it's going to be a definitive focus on restructuring this. And of course, we're going to rethink how we are going to design all these spaces more for less, doing everything contactless. There's a lot of automation that's going to come in. And what we're effectively seeing is our workforce is going to get distributed across various centers rather than being closer to home or being, doing a lot of WFH to disseminate our risk on health. We're definitely going to see increase in commuting times. We've all seen this as public transport will completely climb. Suburban locations for mixed-use developments as well as commercial developments will grow, which is actually leading, connected to the distributed workforce that we will kind of see. We ran a 2.5 million data point survey over the last couple of months, and we were trying to understand what people, wanted to do in a WFL. And the big factor of that is they do want to effectively collaborate, but they don't know if it's, it's happening then and there. People don't feel, the sense of lethargy is there, but they want to come back to work, it's interesting, especially in the APAC region, people want to get back to work pretty quick. And frankly, the younger people suffer more than the older generation that we are. Some of the parameters, and I thought this was important because it kind of explains different markets looking at this. In India, we've kind of said that we want to go back to work primarily because there's a lack of a personal connection, if you're not there, right? Culture, bonding with people, and trust with management is critical parts in the APAC region, especially, in South Asia. Another part that people often, at least in the survey that they put out, they believe that a lack of space for focused work at home is an issue that needs to be resolved. And interestingly, for places like New Zealand and Australia, which are very driven by outdoor activities, they miss the outdoors the most. And one of the things that they definitely want is access to outdoor spaces. I would say we were here before COVID. We are now here, right? And 4.0 is where we've got, and we've already seen, and the image over here shows a stopgap solution of what we are already doing from a diagonal or spaced out seating perspective. We've especially got to recover across physical and behavior, and we believe these are areas of opportunity for all of us and focus areas that we do see going forward in the future. With that, I'm going to stop this presentation here, and I will quickly jump into the panel discussion. And let me ask some of my colleagues in the call some of their ideas on work from home. Sumit, if you could, I mean, someone who's worked in your past of that, it'd be great if you can give us a sense of what a variety of different companies you've seen and what you're seeing out there, what you believe are the challenges that we're currently seeing.
So Khushit, first of all, let me complain. Your voice is not clear and a lot of audience is complaining about it. So get a little bit closer to the mic, it'll help. And that gives me the privilege of, maybe repeat what you've spoken of, and just makes my job a lot more easier.
I'm glad to help.
I think this pandemic, while everyone is involved together in it, the solutions what we see are also similar in every country. There is not much of a difference what is happening in either east of the world or the west of the world. Maybe a little bit because people are moving out more in America than, or more in, forget America, more in Delhi and Bombay than in other cities where the effect is maximum. But that's like a cultural thing, and that proves in itself that we want to move out of a house and we want to go to offices and we want to work. But there is a fear which is stopping us. And if I have to think of it from different locations, and some of it what is covered in your presentation too, that worldwide, people are slowly moving into offices, but there is that fear which is stopping them to move completely. Situation is almost similar everywhere, like what it is in India. Europe is very cautious. People are preferring to work from home due to the fear of spread, and companies are willingly giving flexibility. China, quite surprisingly, has opened up, but then the number of cases have gone down significantly, and what we are hearing, and I don't know how true that is, that it is negligible now. Beijing did show some cases, but as per latest yesterday's report, they are saying that that's also clear.
Right.
I also heard from some people in China that the government in China is not mandating wearing a mask in China, which is quite unlike what is happening in other parts of the cities. Offices have completely opened. People are still given that leeway to come to office or not, but I'm hearing that most people are coming to office. Some strange small time troubles which are starting to impact office goers, which will happen once India, people in India also start. You see marking on the lifts. So a lift which can actually was taking 10 to 12 people is now taking 3 to 4 people at max. Yep. So when the offices, if people are starting, like in China, if people are starting to come to offices regularly, you see a huge number of queues standing outside, and people are sometimes taking, what I heard was 45 to an hour, waiting for a lift. But movement by far is quite open. People are going to restaurants, and people do wear masks when they get into a lift or a closed area, maybe into a washroom. Also, people are a little cautious. Philippines, again, cautious. But cases in Philippines, like in India, are also increasing steadily. Having said that, there are some of the companies are now on a 30 to 40% occupancy, is what I am hearing from few old colleagues of mine. Japan and Australia, like in your presentation too, are not impacted right now in a big way, but the preference of people is still to work from home. So there is still that kind of a scare which is quite visible in nearly everywhere. In short, social distancing norms are being followed in all locations, and people are going very, very slow in how they should be coming out and coming to office or not going to office.
Let me ask Vikas this. Vikas, given the work that you've been doing across the world as well, what are you all seeing on getting back to work? Especially in the Indian context. I think the audience would love to know what we're kind of, as various organizations are doing things, across the country. What are things that are happening specific to the important public?
Thank you, KG. So I'd like to say now, or set the context like now, when we were working in enforced lockdown, it was typically the essential services which were running. That was for a duration of say around 6 to 7 weeks when we had the government enforcing that lockdown. But as such lockdown has been relaxed, it is typically now the segments in which you can break up the workforce or the work areas. Typically, there would be something like now where the remote working is not possible, something like your assembly line workers, your healthcare workers, the transport operations, and such other aspects which now the workers are required to go. And then there is a segment which there can be a possibility of them working remotely, but the preference would be yes, if they can be interfaced. So there is typically your sales and other related operations. And then we call it something as the knowledge workers, which is now the intellect, like we talk about the development or the who are working with the ITS organizations. They are completely, you can say, insulated today. So the intent of the organizations deciding to resume back the operations or try going back to what could be some degree of operations entity to get their operations up and running is basically related to these working classes which are there. So what we are seeing is the most of the manufacturing companies have started resume back work. The healthcare workers never dropped it because they have been on front runners and been supporting us all through. And so have been the various transport operations. As soon as the lockdown opened, most of the transport services like the local bus services, the cab services, the auto services, which were supporting the commute of the workforce, they have been up there. But yes, there are organizations which are very mindful of what they want to now formulate as a strategy. And what we got to understand from the various studies and inputs coming out is that 72% of the HR managers globally are still uncertain when they are going to return back to work. So they didn't still have a date because the way this pandemic is panning out in the various parts of the world, and then what is happening is if it is dying out today, it is returning back after a period of now sometime maybe 3 months, 4 months, as we have seen in the eastern part of the world like the China and Korea and the Singapore. Because earlier when we were talking about Singapore was the best example that they have contained it very well. But about 4 weeks back we heard that now Singapore it's again come up. It's still under control. So it's anybody's guess. It's all wait and watch. There is no one solution which fits all. So the organizations are mindful of that. And given the context of the ITS companies, like Bangalore is known as the Silicon Valley of India. And we hail from Bangalore, working from one of the biggest IT companies here. So the intent is that, yes, if we can make the things happen while working remotely, is there any pressing need to come back to work in the office? If the operations can go as on, so why do we need to come back to work? So I believe most of the tech companies are leading that bit in ensuring that they have these contingencies covered even while working remotely and their operations are not impacted. But yes, the other classes of workforces are slowly treading, but then it's now a very cautious decision being taken by it because they are mindful of that. And as we saw the spate of these infections increasing or the cases being reported in Bangalore increasing over the last weekend or so, it's starting this Thursday, Friday, going up to Monday. So there were a few companies which were preempting this and then they rolled back the office strength to certain levels what they had opened. So I believe it will take some time for all of us to come to terms with it before we formulate some strategy what is going to be the way ahead. But it is a wait and watch approach for now. Back to you, KG.
You know what, you spoke of Vikas about Singapore. My 2 bits on that is Singapore is a very small country. The population over there is 1/3 of what Delhi is. So containing in a small country is much easier. And there have been examples where people have actually got together and had a party, 3, 4 families, and the government has found out and sent those people back. Their visas have been cancelled. So one such, instance ensures fear in everyone's mind. So it gets controlled very easily. Places like Bangalore and Delhi and Mumbai, you can't instill that kind of a fear. And there is a huge disparity between people's salary structure itself and the way they are at home. And it's difficult for people to survive just sitting at home for months.
Right. So if I may take from that, Sumit, you're trying to say that the Indian condition, if I may call it that, limits how much space we've got available, and therefore we're actually living out in each other's pocket. Right?
It's not just space; it's also our ability to run our families' food and health for months without getting a salary in place. So India is a different kind of a problem. Singapore people can survive for years still, comparatively.
Okay. Let me ask. With staff returning to work, you've seen. And I'm going to actually pick up from where Vikas left off. Vikas's opinion is that this will take a really long time. Is that something that you're seeing as well? And if so, what have you and your larger industry said about getting back to work? Right? When do you think we'll get back?
Thank you, Khurshid, and it's a pleasure to be here along with this esteemed panel and guest. Vikas covered on both the anxiety that's going around in terms of when are we getting back to office, and like we said, I think most of us had a plan that we may be getting back to office could have been sometime in June, and that was a month or before early May. I think we were all making some plans that sometime it's going to be in June, but with all the spike that is happening, the plan is not there in terms of the date by which we may be getting back to office. But the most important fact is, as we look at reopening the offices, what are the factors that we want to look at? What are the, what could be the anxiety that is there, and how do we want to address that? Mostly, I think some of the most important factors that we see is gaining the trust and confidence of employees to get back to office, providing that safe environment that they can be in, and how do we build that trust and confidence, as well as the fact that it's a safe environment to be back. I think that's something that we have to continuously address as we go ahead before we actually reopen the office. The reopening office, the date part of it could be to do with a lot of critical risk factors that are there in the industry right now, or there in the cities that we are in. As we clear that, the other important factors, building that confidence in employees. One of the most important, while there are many companies or many industries, like Vikas said, may not be able to work from home, there are companies who are able to work from home for an extended period, and the government ask has also been that to continue on that path. So I think as we look at building the confidence and the trust, there has been a trust factor already between the employer and the employees. The question is, how do we build up on that? And some examples of that has been the existing trust factor has been the fact that the so-called attendance system, how it's being done today, the flexible work guidelines that is there in all the companies that is enabling us to work from home. So there is a trust factor that is existing, but the question is, how do we extend it further? And I think that's the space that we want to work on. The communication that is associated with it. Also, one of the other important factors is that while every one of us is able to work from home working from office is not mandatory for a long time, and it's completely optional. And I think that will build the confidence in terms of how they want to come back to work, because everybody's challenges at home will be very different. They want to come back to work, maybe the nature of the work, they want to come back to work. And how do we minimize that population initially? And we go out with some guidelines, certain things that we want to do, the safety factors being met, build up on that and start off with a very small percentage. And then if there are some learnings over there, build up on that learnings and start ramping up. That's one way of building that confidence and mitigating the risk that is there. I think we need to slowly and gradually ramp up, not be in a hurry because everybody has started working from home, and maybe build up to a 25%, have a pause, and then try ramping up further because it is going to take time and we have to win that confidence through this period.
Right, so let me ask the hard question to the panel, right? The one that everybody's thinking out there, but maybe hasn't asked. Have we done the right thing by perhaps allowing a slow build up, or should we, like China or Vietnam, say, look, we understand you've got to get back to work. Economic activity drives the lifeblood of this nation. We'll help you get to the best possible, PPE and the other stuff available, but you've got to wear it in and out and get the service, but scale up to about 80% of your existing capacity. Is that something that seems credible in the context of?
Is ramping up to 80%? Is that the question?
Yeah. So can we ramp up to 80% if we put the onus of
government? No, I think. Okay, my take on that will be: I think we need to wait because because we are challenging the entire city itself if you're trying to do that. So the best way that we can do is we need to see who are the people who are the frontliners, the frontline work that we have to enable. If we have to enable them, which means that we also have to support the best way we can. And there are some industries who can support it by enabling the work from home and making it making that as giving them that option so that coming to office is not made mandatory. I think we need to work in that direction and slowly bring up the try to see that the challenges are being removed and then get back to the normal. I think we also need to enable others to do their work. By just trying to get to the 80%, we are just going to bring the density up in the city, which is definitely not the right thing to do because so many people who are on the front line is being challenged today: the doctors, the cops, everybody.
I don't see that happening, Kushet, because you don't have public transport. So if you don't have transport to get people to offices, it's just not possible.
So the system is so predicated on transportation that that's the big gap and that's the gap that needs to be solved.
Correct. So till the time vaccine is not there, I feel it is going to be a long wait. And then maybe as we speak today, anything between a 6 to a 12 months at least. Because today, forget about a 80%, we are afraid to have a 20 to a 30% headcount in our office. It's only the organizations which have their compelling reasons that there is an adverse impact on the business or maybe the criticality of the functions what they handle. It is a mandate. Otherwise, most of the organizations for whom the human capital is the biggest asset, they are in a wait and watch mode and no hurry to come back. So it will be a distant dream, I would say, be it any part of the world.
Right.
Kushet, and we all are learning in the journey. So none of us know what needs to be done. And if you look at it, some of the people have been complaining that, hey, was the lockdown at the right time? Did we take out the lockdown at the right time? So questions like that. Nobody knew. So people are just experimenting. And if you ask doctors, what they tell you is that 2 months or 2.5 months, which they got as a lockdown, it helped them to understand the pandemic and how to solve for it. Because everyone was just experimenting. So that slowness really helped the medical fraternity, I would say, who are the ones who are going to save you today.
The segment things differently, right? There's banking that's looking at it differently, manufacturing that's looking at how to manage people differently, right? From how the services segment is looking at it. And my request was, are there lessons to be learned from that, right? Are there things that you believe we should adopt or not adopt? And this is open to the panel, right? Anybody, hear your thoughts.
No, I would say there are a few sectors which open, like the manufacturing sectors and especially automobiles and all. So we have all been hearing that they have been very process oriented, very methodical, a very structured approach, and they are now doing their bit to ensure that the infection is curbed to the bare minimum by following those protocols and guidelines, because these are now the global giants, the big companies which have set up shop in India, and then they cannot have their production impacted now maybe for say 45 to 60 days. So that enforced lockdown itself was a huge impact. So then they will have to slowly get back to work, and then they are following those guidelines. So what things we can learn from them is yes, how we have to be methodical and a process driven organization when it comes to adopting those practices. So few of those practices, like now the way you start from your home until the time you reach the office, and then once you reach the office, what are the various kind of hygiene and best practices you need to follow. That itself is a good example for us. But then the trigger point there is that do we actually want to take, because there is an element of risk involved in that. And then are we ready to take that risk is something. But yes, those are some good practices which the automobile industry in the manufacturing segment is adopting. And then there are learnings from there.
So, on the point of health and safety, I think it's a good idea to perhaps get a large view on, what's happening out there and what's driving the new normal, so to speak, over the next 12 to 18 months. Alok?
So thanks, Kushil. As you rightly said, health and safety is now at the center point of the whole thing. The entire focus has immediately shifted to health, safety, employee well-being, and all that. I think going forward, at least for next 6 months to a year minimum, and further on, we will see a lot of technology and healthcare design getting implemented into the design process. There was a time when the design was really flat. It was not a very welcoming office. Then we had this concept of hospitality coming into the office design. Collaborative spaces happened. We see a lot of things changing in last 5 to 7 years. Then something, we started coining a term called resimercial, which is more like getting a residential flavor in one of your maybe meeting rooms or collab areas and all that. Now going forward, I think it's going to be more of healthcare design and the fundamentals, technology fundamentals which are used in healthcare getting implemented in office purely for the reason of employee well-being. I'll just give you a few examples. So we've heard of isolation enclosures in hospitals. I won't be surprised if there are isolation rooms in offices now, so that if somebody is not well, he can be taken to the isolation room. There would be a separate or a specified air conditioning system in those kind of rooms, so that it does not cross contaminate your office. We've been using MERV filters in our HUs. I will not be surprised if we start using HEPA filters now. UVC lighting, ultraviolet C lighting being used in HUs, in ducts. In fact, there are a few companies now who are also, kind of started selling ultraviolet lights for the common office purpose. Of course, it can't be used in full-fledged manner when the office is on, because it has got its own negative things attached with the human well-being. But yes, maybe before the office starts, you run that for 30 minutes, make sure that the environment is virus and bacteria free, and then allow employees to get in more of fresh air possibly. Of course, there's always a balance between fresh air and the required tonnage. So the moment you increase too much of fresh air, you are going to have that effect on the tonnage. So that's always going to be a challenge. But yes, I foresee that we will probably move towards more of fresh air and those kind of things. And in fact, going forward, these hospitals, when they throw air out, when they exhaust the exhaust air is also filtered. Probably that may also come in terms of not being responsible to the environment. We've always been responsible in terms of energy. We have all heard of LEED and all these ratings, but now we'll, I think, go more towards this kind of responsibility as well, and start filtering the air being exhausted out. That's what I feel.
Right. And are there, we're all talking about these additional support amenities to what one already has to do, right? Including the spacing within the floor plate anyway, right? And design. So, what are the changes that you're seeing in actual design over and above, these changes as support amenities and healthcare amenities that are being put in? What are the changes in design that you're seeing?
So I see there are two types of changes. One is a short-term change, obviously for employees to come in and during this pandemic period, what we need to do, what is needed to be done. And the second is on the long term. See, let's understand that unfortunately today everybody is looking at this pandemic only, and we are taking some short-term measures in terms of extending the height of the screen in front and putting more screens in office, making sure that we have a COVID layout so that we know who's sitting where, and then we are putting sorry, we are having some workstations which are empty and all that. But at the same time, let's understand that this is the first pandemic that we are experiencing in our lifetime, and unfortunately it may not be the last one. So let's be prepared for the next one if it happens, and we think aloud. We need to plan for these kind of scenarios probably happening more often, more lengthy ones happening. This one is happening through droplets. Tomorrow, what happens if something is happening through, which is an airborne thing or a waterborne thing? So that kind of planning needs to be started around now. Of course, right now nobody knows what is going to happen in future, but the thinking process has to start.
Right.
May I add a couple of lines, Khurshid?
Please.
They say, and I'm going to twist that saying, necessity is the mother of innovation.
Yeah.
Everyone is starting to work and think differently. How can we change the environment around us, and what is going to be the most beneficial? Some of new things which I'm seeing now is sneeze guard partitions being talked about. We see the government doing that app which is there, which everyone is supposed to put on their phones. But for companies also, a contact tracing apps, some of them are actually working on to detect interactions between co-workers and see if somebody has actually, if somebody is found positive tomorrow, then who all has he met in the day? So there is some kind of a contact tracing apps within companies also being thought about. Staggered work schedules, everyone is aware of. Possible use of disposable cutlery in cafe. I think this is going to happen a lot in coming time. Disposable plastic covers for keyboards can happen. It all depends on budgets and how much can you really do. And more frequent cleaning during the day instead of traditional night or weekend cleaning. So some of new trends we are seeing in some of the organizations that people are trying to think differently. And it's not just about design in office, not just about 6 feet distancing, not just about, wearing a mask or having the lift. You have to think through on the entire life cycle of a employee when he's in the office. So a good start, I would say everyone is thinking differently and trying to come out with new solutions.
Right. So actually the right thing to do would be to imagine an employee walking into your office building, parking his car in the whatever basement or car park, and from that point of time till he reaches his reception, first the lift, the reception, workstation, cafeteria, training room, whatever, and we actually do that kind of a route map and decide what should be implemented where. That would be the right approach to take.
Which is the entire life cycle.
Yeah, a very valid point. So that's what now most of the companies are doing. They are doing a simulation of that. What would be the touch points from the employee if he was to start for work from his home and till the time he reaches the office? That is one set of now parameters being mapped, and the next set of parameters is while he's at the workplace, what are the touch points? He comes to the reception, takes the elevators, then goes to his workstation, then goes to the breakout area, uses the washroom, what are the various things which can be done. And then as we see, more and more focus will be on touchless technology, sensor based. It can be so that nobody wants to touch anything. And wherever it is mandatory, that apparatus or a device known as a safe key would be given to the people so that it minimizes the risk what they are going to take. And then what I also feel is from a design perspective, as you were mentioning, that the companies which were not forthcoming or open enough to embrace the work from home culture, they are looking at embracing it now. So on an average, most of the HR managers today, as part of the study, they agree that after this crisis is over, they would be in favor of, say, around 20 to 30% of their workforce working remotely on an average. So those are the kind of trends which are emerging out of it. And then what we also need to be cognizant of is that it's not that that space will get freed up in the office. We will might have to redesign it, make more collaborative spaces, reduce the number of workstations, but increase the per employee spread what we were looking at. Maybe now there are different organizations who work around, say, 90 square feet or 110 square feet. That might have to go up to, say, around 120 to 150 because maintaining these norms which is there. But then the people who are working remotely, if they have to come to office, they are coming essentially to collaborate or interact maybe in a and also feel that the four-seater meeting room will be the most sought after because it will be the 2 to 4 people who will be collaborating that in those meetings which are there. Because mostly we see that is a kind of ticket size what we have most of the meeting rooms occupied today. So that will be something, how do we redesign it? But then we are also mindful that this is only a short-term solution. Long-term solution will only happen once this died down or some vaccine comes out.
Right. And how much of this is behavioral led, right? It'll be great to get Renuka's view on that.
Yeah, so to get add on from where Vikas and Sumit spoke on the earlier topic, I think the post-COVID architecture is yet to evolve. And it's going to take time because what we are doing right now is short-term or maybe could be an interim. And as we explored some of the changes that we can do on the high traffic zones in terms of having touchless doors, sensor-based apps, and which are the high traffic areas and how do we want to address it, there's more to come. I'll have covered on the AC part of it, but there's still more to come. And this primarily will also be dependent on how is the work evolving post the COVID changes, because the business is also going through the change. And with a lot of workforce in the future going to be the distributed workforce, which means that it's just not work from office or work from home. It could be work from anywhere. WFA is a new catchword from WFH. So as we look at all that, there are many things that needs to happen. And one of this, the thing that's very, very important is like the people who are self-managers are here to stay as we look at the behavioral changes that needs to happen. Because it is very difficult to move from a culture that we have been, where we have been coming to the office to manage a team or to manage self when you're working away from that culture, when you're working away from the office. And how do we manage that is going to be completely different from the way we have worked so far. So there are, can you manage yourself? Can you manage without seeing your colleagues or maybe, like not having the regular engagement to happen? So there's a lot of behavioral patterns, and the fact that you need to be concerned about others, you're just not managing yourself. You just need to be managing, you need to be concerned about others. These, and also the fact that you had a habit of just leaving the coffee cup wherever you are, just to give a small example, but can you just leave it in the receptacle? Can you just leave it where it has to be left? That empathy that needs to come in and respecting other person's work along with your work. These are some of the behavioral patterns that really need to change. And I'm sure that the change is likely to happen even across industries. It's just not where we are working, but in terms of the construction industry, it's pretty unorganized. There could be many phases of it which is unorganized. The fact is like the workers are coming and waiting, the materials have not come. But can we be a little more planned, organized, and making sure that the safety of everybody is paramount as we look at a lot of these things? I think a lot of pre-planning and being conscious about others, being conscious about self, and how do you get self-motivated and how do you make sure that you are embracing technology, you are embracing behavioral changes, you want to live in a post-COVID world becomes very, very important as we go ahead.
Right.
And there'll be lots of changes. I just mentioned a few of them, but I think there'll be lots more that needs to come in. And primarily, I think it would start from self, because this has been the greatest changing experience of everybody's life. We have gone through a lot of changes, how to adjust ourselves at home, managing work, and all the lessons that has come out, I think it has to be used to a positive effect as we go ahead.
Right. Thank you. In fact, I would say a lot of it is also to be driven by the company because human beings tend to go back to their older behaviors, as I'm sure you're aware. In China, for example, they've mandated no cafeterias across the board. You eat at your desk. It can't be wet food. It has to be some dry foods in some shape and form, right? Especially in a lot of the larger buildings. And this will, in my mind, these changed behaviors will have an impact on how we design our offices as well, right? Perhaps smaller cafeterias, and greater spaces to be created for circulation and the like.
Yeah, and be conscious about the community that we are in, whether it's at
Yeah.
office or home or wherever. It's one of the big behavioral changes that will
Right.
be there out there post this change.
And recently I was reading a blog where this work from home term will not be there. It will be known as a workplace. So that is what the future is in store.
Correct. In fact, that gives me a great segue into the next question. Where does this mean that we're going to look at space reductions in the future as well consistently? I know we both, we more or less discussed that it's going to balance each other out. But as we start from anywhere, and our offices become far more flexible, and our ability to work from different locations and having a differentiated, spread out strategy. Does that mean that we will see a slowdown in the future? Is that something that seems likely?
I would say that's a big statement at this point of time. We are still coming out of where we are today in terms of this. The post-COVID has to emerge, and I think that's when the decisions are being made. And also, there are several factors that's going to influence that. One is the industry that we are in, the segment that we are in. What is the future of that business? Where is their growth going to be? What is the nature of their work? There are several factors that we associated with it, so it may not be one size fits all. And every industry and every business will have its own way of coming out of this, and how do they see the space that they have and the portfolios that they have. What percentage of that will be a distributed workforce when it happens, and what's the growth that they're foreseeing, like Vikas rightly covered in terms of the collaboration space. What is it that they come back to the office for? And in that case, what's the space that they require if you have a distributed workforce? Are you coming to the office because you're not able to work from home for varied reasons, and you just want to find a place for you to work? Maybe the collaboration that is required, and that makes you come back to work. So there are several factors. So to say that we are going ahead with a real estate portfolio adjustment at this point of time, in my opinion, I think this is one area which has to be wait and watch. Yeah.
Yes, it's too early to comment anything. We'll have to be wait and watch. Yes, you can say in the medium to a short term, there might be a drop in demand with no new projects or expansion plans being put on hold. But yes, how it pans out in the long term will be anybody's guess.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what? I have another view to this. While yes, a short-term story where nothing is happening, so there is a reduction of demand and things are not moving. But in a longer term, I still hear from few people in the industry that they have closed some deals in the recent times, which is so good to hear. Now that shows what the direction will be when everyone starts coming back to work. Now the bigger story is the work which will come out from other Asian countries and can move to India. That will change the demand cycle completely. There was this financial meltdown in 2008, and there was a pain in the real estate industry, but that pain did not stay for long, in spite of the fact that there was a lot of vacant capacity available at that point of time. Whereas in today's time, a good grade A capacity is not very significant. So you will see some contraction, some reduction, but because a lot of manufacturing work will move into India, hopefully, because of the political scenario, you will see a spike in, that's my view, in a couple of years from now.
I just want to add on some other anecdote. Like we may not be eating from a restaurant today, we are all safely eating at home, but doesn't mean that when we get back to the after everything is over or that phase, it's not there for long. It's not that we won't be going back to a restaurant.
Renuka, the catch is a lot of restaurants are closing down, so you would
correct. But
probably
then
not
even
get
then, whatever emerges and whatever stays, but then even then, it's not that all of us will be for a lifetime, like we are going to be in this state.
Completely agree.
Yeah. So
KG, in the interest of time, I believe we should
Yeah.
move on to the next segment now. Then there are people waiting with their queries. So
In
let's.
fact, I have been reading from the Q&A for the last few minutes. A lot of questions come on there.
He's been asking questions from there actually.
Yeah, a couple of them, yeah.
Okay, so thank you so much, panel members. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give you all a few minutes so that even other speakers can probably go through the questions. I see a lot of specific questions have been asked to even Alad, in fact. So I'm just going to give you all some time, to go through the questions. In the meantime, I'll just run a quick video for the audience members, introducing you to Alhad, in fact, mentioned how UV light can probably help, disinfecting surfaces and this, which is a great technology. Light in itself helping us sterilize our spaces. So this is something that Wipro kind of brought on, actually. So this is one of their products that they've come up with, which is called the Ultra Ray. So continuing the legacy of developing lighting solutions meant for wellness, specifically for people, Wipro Lighting had recently launched Ultra Ray. This is one of industry's first UV LED luminaire range with this particular feature. Leveraging on the strong germicidal properties of ultraviolet ray, the product, the Ultra Ray range of LED luminaires, actually complement the current protection measures deployed to disinfect the workspace more effectively to ensure employee health and protection and also safety. Given that clean and disinfected spaces is a must-have, to significantly reduce the risk of employees being infected, being absenteeism, and to improve their complete mental health, when they know that they are safe. It is with this particular genesis in mind that Wipro came up with this particular product and this range. And I would like to run a quick video for the audience members present with us here today to just give them a glimpse into what this product is about. Okay, so Khurshed, do you want to just join in on the Q&A segment and take it up? Are the speakers okay? If we go ahead with others, we'll take few good top questions and probably we can stick up. We have around 5 minutes in our timeline. So yeah.
Sure. So I want to pick a couple. I think they really pointed at Alad right now and others as well. From a perspective of HVAC systems and how to manage them to minimize the spread of any potential virus in the future and the pathogen, obviously. And of course, another one was on design changes to improve lighting. Alad, could you please weigh in?
As I was, discussing about the AC systems which are used in healthcare industry, it would be nice for all of us to go through the report which ISHRE has come out with just about a few days back, and that report specifically talks about. It's not about office industry, mind you. It talks about healthcare industry and what are the norms to be followed in the COVID scenario for a standard hospital to be converted to COVID hospital and a standard room to be converted to a COVID patient room and all that. But a segment of that can really be pulled out for our reference, and we can use it for applying it in our context as well. So it'll be really nice to go through that.
Would you have any inputs on antibacterial solutions and advanced materials in the future? Is that something that you, Vikas, or Renuka, and Sumit would see as something making its presence felt in the future?
See, frankly, antibacterial and in terms of material, there is a confusion right now. We've seen antibacterial handle covers coming out in the market saying that, okay, this is tested for 10,000 touch and things like that. So you put that cover to the handle and, then the spread is not there. Having said that, there are always two schools of thought. And carpet is a big debate point. Does the carpet really allow the spread of bacteria and viruses, or it stop the spread of bacteria and viruses, is something which is still being debated in the industry. There are experts who say that if you have a very clean flat surface and if the mopping is not done right, in fact you are putting up a film of virus onto the entire surface rather than it being at one location. So I think currently we are in a situation where everybody is confused. We'll need some time and a lot of R&D to get into the actual results in hand and come to a conclusion that, okay, this is really what I need to implement in terms of material.
So, KG, to answer that, I would say that antimicrobial films, which use the nanotechnology, have been used in the hospitals and high traffic areas like the airports across the world, even before this crisis set in. So they are tested and proven, and then yes, they can prevent to an extent what the infection could be. But if you were to say they are a foolproof mechanism for putting it on hold, it is not there.
But it definitely reduces, you would say.
Absolutely.
Yeah. A couple of interesting questions around co-working and the fact that everybody's taken space in the past in co-working, but now it's kind of slowed down. Would co-working be a phenomenon going forth in the future? Because I think that's a very strong possibility.
So it looks difficult to say anything because you don't know what are the kind of hygiene and sanitation levels being followed by the co-occupants. See, you can control your environment in a structured manner, but beyond that, it is something which is not in control. And see, most of that also feel that if we are having two set of premises, that is your own campus and a leased building, the control you have over your own campus versus the control you have over a leased building where multiple tenants are there, it is difficult. And in a co-working, it is an open environment, a work culture which was promoted now or came into being, say, about 4 or 5 years back, and it was thriving on based of the kind of the vibes and the look and feel which was created. But then going forward, I believe when we're talking about now people avoiding that public places or that areas which have a lot of transgress of people in and out, you would be mindful of now doing that. But let's see how it evolves because it's anybody's guess. But in the short term or medium term, it is a no-go.
The flip side to what Vikas is saying is that, while offices are contracting, I think companies would also want to spread across in multiple, geographies. And so that you can avoid people traveling for longer distance and using public transport. So that's also another reason. And then you would not may want bigger offices in the longer term perspective. So there is a flip side to it also. I see a positive side, and I agree with Vikas from a negative side. Not all co-working guys have the best of the hygiene. The problem with that is the moment they start that good amount of hygiene over there, their cost per seat will increase, and then it won't make look like a viable solution for a company to move on. So it's a catch-22.
Yeah. So in fact, a number of people in Bombay are already. A number of our clients are actually looking at this across the board. It's a situation that everybody wants to evaluate, but yes. I think as Vikas and Renuka rightly pointed out, nobody's pulled the trigger on as yet.
Yeah. So I just want to add on to that point of when we look at work from anywhere. When you have a collaboration hub and a company has a collaboration hub and you're looking at, are we taking space in another co-working? The question is if you're saying work from anywhere, it can be work from home. And then apart from that, you are taking the space. But does it get used or the employees want it is a different aspect. So I think we need to evaluate from that aspect as well. When you say that it can be working from anywhere, why that space that we took up? It can be from anywhere else. So if we look at it and what is the space meant for? And if it's just two people coming there, are they really in touch with the leadership team? Are they really in touch with what they want to achieve? Or they just come there, sit and go? There's several questions that come around that, because it's always that we cannot, if someone is seeking a co-working space, this is from an employee side of stuff. The culture that is there at the hub can never be, it will never be the same, replicated at other space. So there's, I agree with all of them. It's too early in the game to say that, would we go with that model?
Right.
Distributed model, yeah.
In fact, one of the questions that I'm seeing a lot repeated in this particular Q&A session is, how are companies planning for staggered return? And when do you think that's going to happen?
Yeah, staggered return. I think the first teams who would return to the office would be, there are two factors that will determine who will come back first. One is what is most essential from our business side, the critical people who essentially needs to be coming and they're just managing their work. What is it from the business side? Second is, there could be some people who are really challenged working from home or working where they are from. So they may want to come back. So that may constitute the initial percentage. The question that will definitely come up is, why are you getting back right now? So that will limit the percentage. And this pilot team who gets back to work, I think will help us in terms of first giving them a safe environment, just making sure that everything is taken care of. But they would help us in terms of, is there anything more that we can do as we ramp up? And we should be taking that part very carefully, considering the fact that it is employee safety that is most important.
Yeah, and KG, just to add to your point, the other day we were having an informal chat amongst a few of us from Bangalore. So the point which most of us now could relate to as a feedback from the various stakeholders or people whom we could chat up with was, what is the need for us to come back to home office if we are working productively from home? Why would you want us to spend around 2 to 3 hours on a daily basis? We can utilize it for some productive use, and then we have already got used to that. So people are now asking a reason. Is it a mandate for us to come back to work? Or if we can continue doing like this till such time normalcy returns, what is the challenge in that?
Right. I'm now seeing a question from obviously someone in design. And the question is, we've seen the existing spaces evolve over 100 years of different R&D of human behavior and getting to different work styles and sets. What are our optimistic views on the timelines required by our community to start accepting the new normal? What do you think? And I'm asking you guys to crystal ball gaze here. How long do you think it will take for people to transition to our new normal?
The biggest disruption has already taken place. With no playbook, with no curtain raiser, with no proof of concept, the biggest disruptions of our life has already taken place.
And any company's BCP manual had not captured it.
Yes.
The best of the companies in the world.
Which means that we have all adjusted to it. It was instant, and there was nothing of this magnitude that has ever happened. In all the BCP books, there is a disaster recovery plan, BCP plan and all that, but not to this extent and not to this 3-4 months that we are talking about. So that itself is the greatest test of time. So as we look at it, I think what is going to emerge is also, if I could say this, it's just not being done from facility manager or a real estate or a architect's design. It's the question of what the business wants. How is their nature of the work changing, and how do we want to support that will play a very important part in how the design is going to be and the requirements with which that we are going back to the design team with. That's one. Second is, one of the things that was not normally discussed is the BCP plan. Now, when it comes to the design, that will also be a point of discussion as we go ahead. Yes. So that will also get into our design requirements right now. So all these are the changes that's definitely going to evolve.
Right.
And I think it will evolve with everything else.
I'm going to quote Sumit here. Necessity is the mother of all adaptation, right?
Innovation.
And adaptation.
Tusheth, you tell me the date when the vaccine is happening. I'll tell you the date when we are getting normal.
Your guess is as good as mine. Anyway, perfect. I think we'll close our Q&A session here. Thank you all, and I'll give it this back to Rashmi. Thank you.
All right. Honestly, thank you so much, each of my speakers, for giving us your time, giving us your insights, giving us such knowledgeable thought process of what is happening in your companies, in the profession, in the industry. I see that there are still a lot of questions that are coming in. In fact, it started pouring in more after we started taking up the Q&A, but we are already over time. So I would just request from the speakers one small thing. Probably if I can send you all these questions, if you all have your time, if you all could probably give us few inputs, onto the question, specifically when it's been addressed to each of you all specifically. If you all could probably give us certain inputs, I would love to share it with our members here who have attended with us. Unfortunately, we obviously couldn't take a lot of the questions here, but irrespective, thank you so much. Honestly, this was great. It was an amazing chat. We not only literally discussed what is happening, but we discussed a lot of other stuff, be it from like even co-working. That was something we hadn't even discussed in our pre-discussion session, which I realize is an important segment. A lot of large companies have been taking on co-working. Thank you so much for sharing your views across all of those topics. And do let me know if you need anything else, audience. If you all have any more questions addressed to the speakers, do mail to us. I would love to get it answered by them. With this, we log out. And thank you so much once again, speakers.
Thank you, Rashmi.
Thank you, Rashmi.
Everybody.
Thank you,
everyone.
Renuka. Thank you, Vikas.
Bye.
Thank you, Alal.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Sumit.
you,
And thank you, KG, for really lovely taking this over and
Thank you.
moderating this.